talking about God in heaven, who is the Father of Jesus, and indirectly, of course, the Father, as we say, of all believers and even of all mankind. But he said, I have much to say about you, and I have much to judge, but God who sent me is true. And what I tell to the world, I heard from God. Now this man is making such extraordinary claims that either he is a deceiver or he is the one who is God's revelation of truth that you and I ought to follow. Read again now from verse 28 through verse 30.
So Jesus said, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own authority, but speak thus as the Father taught me. And he who sent me is with me, and he has not left me alone, for I always do what is pleasing to him. As he spoke thus, many believed in him.
Now he has claimed in the morning of the one day to be the water of life, that if we come to him that we will never thirst, and there will be such an abundant supply that the overflow will provide water for many other thirsty people. In the evening service, he has claimed to be the light of the world. He has claimed in the passage we're reading here that he is the one that can save us from our sins if we believe in him, and if we do not believe in him, that we will die in our sins. In this verse 28, he says, I do nothing on my own authority, but I speak thus as the Father taught me. And then in verse 29, I always do what is pleasing to God. I have never yet, in my now well more than 40 years in the ministry, I have never yet heard a man who dares to say that I never do anything that is displeasing to God, and everything I do is pleasing to God. This tremendous claim made here clearly puts Jesus either in the realm of being deluded, being a deceiver, or being exactly what he said that he is. And I, of course, am on the side of those who wouldn't take him for what he claimed to be. Now, let's just take for a moment in passing this word to believe. The only people who can bear testimony to us about the life of Christ are those who were on the earth when he lived here. That limits us to the years of his public ministry from approximately 27 down to AD 30. Now, these records are preserved for us in the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're either first or second-hand witnesses, but out of that generation. Now, if you believe the witness of these men, then you are, by that fact, a believer. If you do not believe the record that is given of Jesus, you are, therefore, an unbeliever. It's just as simple as that. If I were to ask you, are you a Christian, you might answer me one way. If I ask you, are you a believer? That's the same thing in another wording. A believer is a person who accepts the accuracy of the records of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as being authentic and giving us a dependable, accurate record of what occurred. Don't split hairs. Don't get hung up on problems that go from one culture to another as we have translations. Don't let minor things stop you, because the record is clear that Jesus claimed to be the Son of God and to do what God asked him to do and to be. He always does what pleases the Father. Again, you have three options. Either Jesus was self-deceived, or he was a deceiver, or he's what he claimed to be. I trust you will accept the latter. We move on now into another appeal given in verse 31 down through verse 33.
Jesus then said to the Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. They answered him, "We are descendants of Abraham and have never been in bondage to anyone. How is it that you say you will be made free?" And Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not continue in the house forever. The Son continues forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed."
The verse 32 is so famous that it is carved in the stones on some of America's greatest colleges and universities. Even in the small college I attended years ago, this was, of all places, above the blackboard in the science department, not in the religion or the philosophy department, but in the science department. Above the blackboard in the front of the lecture room, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Now, we ought to understand we're not talking about just truths in general. We're talking about specific truth, ultimate truth. And the freedom we're talking about now is freedom from error, freedom from being mistaken, freedom from being misled, freedom from being lost in eternity. We get free from sin and the consequence of sin, the judgment of sin, the punishment of sin. He whom the Son makes free is free indeed. But his audience said, "Well, we can't be, you can't accuse us of being not free. We are Abraham's children." Now, this is so far from the truth that it's ridiculous. They say we have always been free. We're not in bondage to anyone. Now, the fact of the matter is that the northern 10 tribes had gone into captivity to Assyria about 750 years before this, 722 BC, being the fall of Samaria. The southern kingdom of Judah had lasted 125 years longer, and in 3 successive captivities, they had been taken captive to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar in 605, 597, and 587 BC. After they were in captivity there, then Babylon fell to Persia, and they were the captives of Persia who allowed them to come back and become a dependent province of Persia, but they were under bondage to Persia. Persia fell to the Greeks, and they became under bondage to Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great died, and his generals divided up his kingdom, and the Ptolemies became the kings in Egypt to the southwest of Palestine, and the Seleucidae became the kings of Syria to the northeast of Palestine, and they fought over Palestine continuously, and except for a brief period under the Maccabees, they had been under the Egyptians or under the Syrians for all the intervening time. And now in 63 BC, the Romans had come in, and they were under the Roman power, and they had not been free politically for years and years and years. In fact, it had been 700 years for most of them, and they were absolutely under outsiders. And yet in their zeal to explain their situation and justify themselves, they say, "We have never been in bondage to any man," and they were paying taxes to Rome at the very time they made this disclaimer. Jesus answers them by saying that I'm not talking about bondage to Rome. I'm not talking about being a slave in somebody's house and carrying his water and cutting up his firewood. I'm talking about a man who sins. He's accusing them now of being a slave to sin. And he said, I'm talking about freedom from sin. If the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. Read verse 37 through verse 39.
"I know that you are descendants of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me, because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. And they answered him, Abraham is our father."
Now you see, this matter of the ancestry of Jesus runs through this in the background. This old scandal, this old wives' tales coming out of Nazareth continues to pop up here.